I appreciate it. What's funny about that is what I'm about to talk about today is definitely not what you would call a really uplifting topic. In fact, somehow the past couple of years, I got the nickname the Prophet of Doom, which is horrible. Certainly doesn't sell t-shirts. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to step back in time. And how did this all come about? Back in 21, based on some notes, based on some things that I was seeing around 2015, we put everything together. We wrote the demographic drought. And when we did drought, it really was kind of the shocking piece about, I think you all need to be paying attention to something that's happening here, and that is this inversion that we're starting to see as people are getting older. When we were doing drought, when I was out on the road talking about drought, something kept eating at me about what I was seeing in the data that I was presenting. And that led to the second article called Who's Going to Do the Work? Who's going to do the work? We interviewed 1,500 high school students, and we asked them, what are you going to do when you get out of high school? And the story of what we found out about that was really shocking. And so that piece came together, and I spoke on that for a long time. Well, as you're doing all of these things, and you're getting farther and farther away from the pandemic, the trends that we speculated on back in 21 started to become a lot more clear to us. So that needed an update. So that was the rising storm, which we just put out towards the end of last year. Some things I need to say right off the bat and tell all of the audiences I speak to. Number one, this is going to be pretty dark, but it's not intended. The point of the article was to scare people unless it scares you into action. And that's exactly what the hope was, to cause people to start to consider, and you'll hear me say this again and again, things you never thought you would consider before. Relook at things that you probably already had formed opinions on, but you probably need to change those opinions. The second part of it is, I have no motivation outside of being a labor economist. I have been doing this for 32 years, analyzing the labor market. My fascination is how does work get done? That was the obsession that I tried to put into Rising Storm. How we framed this narrative was around this obsession of how does work actually going to get done as we go into the future. So I just want to get those things out of the way as we go into this. So the way that this has to work is we have to do this almost like a story. We're going to go back in time and we're going to look at the conditions. It's like a storm. Imagine me as a forecaster who's sitting there telling you something's happening in the tropics. Now, I live in Florida. The whole point of hurricane forecasting is so that when the hurricane arrives, you're ready for it. So that was just such an applicable way of looking at this. And unfortunately, we released this right at the point where that hurricane hit North Carolina. And everybody went, you really want to do this? I'm like, yes, it's still good. It's still good. Please stick with me on this. But it really works like this. We're going to look at how the conditions form. Then we're going to move this to what's just happened the past several years. So we'll call this the hour bands because it's not the storm. What's happened the past couple of years is not what we're actually seeing is going to happen, but it's a taste of what is coming. And then with that in mind, we're going to step forward. We're going to look at what does landfall actually look like? Where do we see it? Why do we see this and say, hey, this isn't good? As the kids say, the math is not mathing. So that was the big part of this paper as well. Lastly, and probably most disappointingly, we're going to talk about how do you prepare for this. The point of this, of course, remember I'm an economist, so we raise problems, we don't solve them, right? So the thing we're trying to do here is say, I don't have all of the answers, but you do, okay? If I can get you as a hospital, a nursing home, as a company that's doing construction, or any of these things to say, hey, look, I may have to look at how we're doing work differently. If I've done that, then that's great. I need to help people have the confidence to make bold decisions. That's why the paper exists, is to help you make bold statements, get your points across without sitting there going, no, I feel this way. No, you'll know the things are happening when you're done seeing this data. So with that in mind, let's step into it. We'll talk about the boomers. The critical aspect of the boomers really comes down to something that's so important, and just that at the very essence of supply and demand. So we have the boomers, right? We have more children, 46 to 64, we're having more children. That's people. We need to talk about what happens when those people hit the labor force. So 46 to 64, the first ones start entering the labor force around 1970. Okay? When that happens, as these children are getting older and entering the labor force, at the same time, women start entering the labor force in earnest for the first time in history. So what you have as a result of that is this massive net increase in our labor force of 42.5 million, a net increase, okay? Prior to that, prior 20 years, we did about 22 million. The 20 years right after, we did 27. The most recent 20 years were like 19. This is unprecedented. It's a lot of people. We were not built to have that many people in our economy that quickly. So when you have that, it has an effect on your mentality. And this is the mindset. I almost hate saying boomer mindset, because it's like, okay, boomer. But this is the mindset of the people coming through this time. And number one, hey, I've got to get a college degree. I got to stand out. I'm going to get a degree, and that will help me get a job. I'm competing with so many people. Number two, I'm going to move anywhere I have to get a job. In the 70s, everybody moved. We moved all over the country. We moved. That's what we had to do. Wherever the job was, you had to go get it, because there may not be jobs in your market. I don't know if I want a family. I mean, both of us are working now. We have working couples now for the first time in history. Having a family is a lot harder than it used to be. We're going to have less children as a result of it. Hey, look, when I go for people, I want to hear jobs. Create jobs. Low unemployment, jobs, low unemployment. All of you in this room look like you've been alive for a couple of years. That's what we've all heard. We've heard it all of our lives. The reason is you needed this. This was the obsession. How do you take care of the people around you if you're not working and you're competing with everybody for those jobs? I don't want immigrants. Why in the world would I want more people to compete for the jobs? I already have so many people here. I don't want more people here. That's a mentality. It makes a lot of sense. In this context, you start to go, I get it. I get where they were coming from back in the 70s, in the 80s. Lastly, I need to look out for myself. Companies at this point are getting like, hey, people are disposable. I can get rid of money, get 20 more tomorrow. So if that's the case, loyalty's gone. I'm going to focus on what I have to do to stay employed. That's the big drive. If I'm an employer, we got to switch this around. Hey, look, training. I don't need to train. I'm going to put the most ridiculous job description out there, and I know I'm going to get a bunch of people applying for it. There's so many people, somebody out there is going to have what I want. In fact, I'm going to start developing technologies just to get rid of all these people so I don't have to see. We invest in ATSs. We make things so ridiculous. We have so many check boxes, and we're bouncing people left and right. Too many people. I don't want to see all these people. We got to get them away from us. Hey, what we pay is what we pay. You kidding me? You don't like it, pal? Hit the street. I got 20 people ready to take this job with mine. There's so many cutthroat movies from the 80s. I was just watching, was it Glengarry Glen Ross the other day? This cutthroat attitude of like, produce or get out of here. That was so prevalent. In the 80s, think about the 80s. When the boomer generation were all in their 30s, 40s, this is the prime. So many people hitting those 80s at the same time. And then the very idea of cycling people. Hey, you know what? We have a lot of business coming in. We'll bring a bunch of people in. Hey, business slowed down. Get rid of them all. Oh, we need them again. Bring them back in again. All this fluctuation. All of these happen when you have so much of the supply that you can do that. But now we have what's called, as everybody knows, the silver tsunami. This is the most incredibly illustrative example that you can have. So this is the number of people in our country over the age of 55 over time. And you notice a little bit of a change here as we get about 2004 going to 2009. So that's what the boomers look like as they get short. So think about this. This huge population is coming through. In the 70s, they're young couples. We build homes like crazy. We're building homes. 80s. They're now in the early part of their career. They need investment options. The stock market starts to explode. Huge group of people coming through. You're not noticing it. It's a tsunami. You don't see the wave in the ocean. It's moving forward. Start seeing healthcare picking up in the early 2000s. Why? This wave is moving forward. Now you feel the wave. Just like the tsunami, when the wave hits shore is when you feel it. And now we're feeling it because these people are all exiting out of the labor force. So what's interesting about this is the boomers, as a part of the labor force, are now the fourth largest part of our labor force. They were passed up by Gen Z. I don't know if you knew that. More Gen Z's working in our labor force now than boomers. So this group, which dominated everything way back when in the 90s and 80s, dominated, are now the fourth largest component. But the mentality overwhelms all of the other components that are in here. So with that in mind, where have things been going the past couple of years? Let's talk about these outer bands that we've been feeling. During the pandemic, a bunch of people dropped out of the labor force. A bunch. This is the labor force participation rate, something no one ever talked about, no one ever cared about, became an obsession. So we see this massive plunge, then it starts to improve, not for the reasons that you may think. but it's really struggling. It's a percentage. No one cares about a percentage, so let's turn that into a number. That's 5 million people. Overnight, 5 million people said adios to the labor force. So just so you know, they didn't die. Okay, they left. So to be in the labor force, you have to be working or looking for work. If you're not either of those, you are out of the labor force. And like a light switch, 5 million people pretty much said, I'm done. This number had been pretty solid, very consistent at 95 million for a pretty long period of time. This is quite a jar to the system. So if we look at this and we go, wow, so everybody just left the labor force. Well, not everybody. It's a specific group of people. So if we look at it, about 80% of the people who dropped out of the labor force were over the age of 55. And people thought, well, they're a little freaked out right now, pandemic, they'll come back. I bet you a lot of early retirements, and none of that's true. This was all over 55. This is the labor force participation rate. It's never recovered. It shows no signs of recovery. When the St. Louis Fed analyzed the data, it was not early retires. It was people who were 75, who were just lingering in the labor force, saying, I think I want to work a couple more years. And at the same time, all of them made a collective decision and said, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm crazy at that time. So this was the projected amount of retirements that we had. This is the amount we've actually had. That's 3 million more retirements than what was projected back in 2019. Okay, it's a shock to the system. In the paper, we say 8 to 1, but it's actually more accurate to say, as we go forward, the issue that you run into is when you retire, you go from being someone who produces a good and consumes a good to just a consumer of food, of healthcare, of product. And we're growing those at a rate of 4 to 1, basically over the next 6 to 8 years. A lot of people need a lot of things, but we are not growing this part. The people who have to make things for people, the people who provide services, who work in the restaurants, who work in healthcare, who work in nursing homes. As we look at the population that takes care of people, when we look at that ratio, back in the 50s, about 6 people for every person out of the labor force to take care of them. That starts working its way down. Around 2024, we got below 3. That number is projected to continue to decline. There are things that can make that decline quicker, which we'll talk about. But you can start to see that it's a lot of people needing things, but we just don't have a lot of people to provide them. One of the biggest issues, something we talked about in demographic drought, something that was kind of a passion of mine, I wrote my first blog about it in 2020, is this kind of disappearance of men. Men have been kind of leaving the labor force. And what's happening as a result of that? Who's replacing them? So first off, this is prime age, 25 to 54-year-old men. This is their labor force participation rate. And as you can see, it has taken quite a hit over the past several decades. So this is participation. It's not numbers, it's participation. That number came down quite a bit. You see lately, it kind of got back up again. Don't be fooled. I'll explain that one as well. So why is this a problem? Here are the jobs that are dominated by men. Not kind of, complete. Plumbers, 98% of our plumbers are men. 98% of the people who fix your cars, men. Carpenters, we can stick through all of these. They're not kind of in these professions, they dominate these professions. This is the unemployment rate for production workers, laborers. Okay, low's bad, low's tight. Okay, we are sitting here hovering in all-time historical lows. It's going up a little bit, but these are all-time historical lows. These are not things that we can see kind of undoing themselves, as we'll talk about. What has happened? Where have men gone? Well, 2 things as we talked about in the paper. Number 1, we got a lot of men locked up. The astounding stat that we found that I never even would have ever guessed this is 1 out of 10 men will end up behind bars at some point in their life. I'm not going to look at this room closely because I'm looking at it. But I'm just saying, 1 out of 10, that's a crazy stat. We've got 1.4 million prime age men currently in the prison system. The other issue, of course, is opioid addiction, but it's not just about opioids. There actually is a lot of other drugs that are out there. I know right now in the climate, we're hearing a lot about fentanyl, but you need to know there's all kinds of drugs that are out there to take people out of the labor force. But we have about 2.7 million people out of the labor force dealing with addiction. Okay? These are huge issues. When you see videos, when you walk around the streets and you see people lying down and just suffering from something, I want you to go beyond it and start to think, what is this person? I wonder what their age is. I wonder what they could be doing right now. This is the kind of way we have to start to look at this. These are human beings who could be, may still be productive people in our labor force. But these are the people that we're losing. So the problem that we're having here is this. We have a really dated perception of who we are as a country. When you think of the labor force, you have a tendency to think of it as old Joe Lunchpail who goes off to the manufacturing plant. Manufacturing is 9% of employment. That ship sailed decades ago. We are very, very educated. The biggest part of our labor force, by far, not even close, are people with a 4-year degree, 65 million. Another 36 million have like an associate's degree, and then a much, much smaller number of people in our labor force that only have a high school diploma or less. Let's go into this a little bit more. Since the beginning of the pandemic, our labor force has grown by 4 million people. Its netted growth was 4 million. All of that growth are people with a 4-year degree. 6.5 million. Whoa, to get to 4 million from 6.5 million, I have to subtract. So I'm going to subtract 2.5 million people over the past 5 years who are no longer in the labor force or went on and got a college degree in some way, shape, or form. Those people are not here. All of our labor force growth are people with a college degree. So why is that important? Because 60% of the open jobs that we're looking at right now in our Lightcast data don't need a college degree of any kind. These are the jobs that take care of society. This is kind of how communities function. This is what's caused this kind of, we were so used to this war for talent. Back in 2000s, war for talent, and that all was about tech. It was about STEM jobs. War for talent is all I ever heard about. Everybody needs to get an IT degree because we have this war for talent. Now we have a war for talent. But the war for talent is in that sub-$25, sub-$30 an hour job. That is not something we've ever faced ever in the history of our country. We're not used to seeing this kind of shortages. But this is something we're hearing about on a regular basis. When we look at jobs that face the most number of retirees in the next 5 years, we see a lot of jobs that don't require 4-year degrees. Home health aides, laborers, building cleaning workers, admins, just truck drivers like the local drivers here, retail sales. We get all the way down here to nurses, general operations managers. First time we run into these jobs. Okay, of the top 10 jobs in our Lightcast data, job postings, number 1, nurses, and it's not even close. That is the most in-demand job in the entire country. The rest, outside of 1, do not need a college degree. In fact, they don't really need a degree of any kind. There is one that may, and that's sales reps. Maybe, maybe not. Just depends on the environment that they're in. And then truck drivers, some of them need a CDL. But for the most part, this is an economy that is looking for people to get work done. Let's talk about nurses. Well, that's only 4% of our college graduates last year. 4% had a nursing degree. 18% had a business degree. At no point in Rising Storm or in anything I say today will you hear me say, this country has a shortage of people with a business degree. We got so many of them.
Hey, bro.
This explains a lot of what you see. When you see angst in the media, when you see angst on LinkedIn, think about the people that populate these sites, the people that are creating this press, the people that are responding to this press. They fall into a bucket that we have quite a lot of. And they're the ones kind of feeling this pressure of things don't feel so good right now. Not in your world. We got a lot of supplies a little bit in the demand. We're kind of in this permanent state of help wanted. So the way this has kind of gotten funny is that the Fed just trying to pull off all of this inflation we had in 21 and 22. We had a lot of, it's crazy inflation, pretty much was caused basically a wage push. We had a lot of people close to the product getting wage increases. Things got crazy. The Fed goes, we're going to pull this off like we did in the 80s. We're going to increase interest rates. So for 22 months, Powell starts increasing the interest rate. At the end of the whole thing, inflation finally came down, but not for the reasons that you thought. We still have the same number of unemployed now as we had in 1970, even though our labor force is 104% larger. So we really didn't weaken much by doing this. In fact, if you've been paying attention, the past 3 months, unemployment rate's going right back down. It's now at 4%. And don't lose perspective. 4% is insanely low, historically speaking. Let's talk about your area in this context. So we talked about nationally we have a problem with labor force. We have people kind of dropping out of labor force. When you look at the New York City area, you're stuck. You haven't seen labor force growth in the past 5 years. It was starting to get a good upward trend. You're getting some growth back again. It's kind of just meandering about. But your population is changing enough. Not changing enough. This kind of matches some areas that we're in. I was spoke in North Carolina last week. Population's exploding, labor force is going down. I'm like, this is a catastrophe. You can't have people retiring to your area. Retirees consume. They don't produce. I'm not insulting them. It's just a factor that didn't matter in the past but matters now. In your case, you're kind of imagining an issue that's kind of going on in your population in general. However, your unemployment rate of 4.3%, historically speaking, is incredibly great. Very, very low, but not too tight. You do have some capacity to hire here. This isn't as crazy as some of these markets I go to. Greensboro last week, 3%. 3%, no homes for people to move into, pretty much kind of start where they're at. Your job postings still have absolutely soared. Go back to the pre-pandemic, 70,000, you have 218,000 now. So 3 times as many job postings. What are you looking for? Let's use the lens that we looked at earlier. You need nurses, well, everybody does. I'll explain to you why you really need them in a second. Retail clerks, here we go again, home health aides. Sales reps. Software developers, that's actually unique to your area. Secretary admin retail, customer service reps, and marketing managers, general ops managers. You actually did really well here. You have 4 jobs in our top 10 that need a college degree. You're one of the best markets I've ever seen grading that. But you also need a lot of people to take care of the people in the sick. Wages, offered wages, when we take out the professional roles, these are the offered wage, the advertised median wage. This is what's happened in your market in the past several years. A 50% increase in offered wage. You definitely have a war for talent here in those other jobs. All right, let's take this and go forward. This is not the storm. If you've been feeling a lot of pain, if you felt a lot of pain in 21, 22, that was an outer band. If you're not feeling pain now, it's because the outer band kind of went through. If you're still feeling it, that's kind of bad news because the outer band's kind of gone through. The next bands will come in the next several years. So here's how this all takes shape. We're going to do this through what we looked at as this phenomenal math problem. When the Bureau of Labor Statistics looks forward, they determine, kind of based on population, dynamics of the population, how much they think the labor force is going to grow to 2032. And their number was 6.4 million. We're going to net growth of 6.4 million. Let's take this number apart. When you look at the BLS projection, 3.8 million of that 6.4 million, they say are going to be over the age of 65, net growth. Now, for everybody in this room, just want you to think about the jobs you have, companies you work for, and let's just think about how many of those jobs typically employ people over 65. Because that's where they're saying this is where it's going to come from. This is where we're going to get our net growth. Okay, so that leaves us 2.6 million 16 to 64-year-olds. But I got some bad news. The 16 to 24-year-old labor pool, that's shrinking. They're not in here. They're down 1 million. Okay? So we don't have an entering labor force to come in and give us any net growth. It's taking away. When we look at these data as well, we know that about 2/3 of those coming into this labor pool will have a college degree. That leaves us 900,000 people for the entire United States up till 2032, or 90,000 net new people every year to fill jobs that do not require 4-year degree. 90,000 net new to fill jobs. So right now in our data, we have 200,000 job openings in construction and home improvement. We have 350,000 jobs open in the food industry, which is everything from a seed that goes into the ground, processes, shipped to cold storage, put into a grocery store, put into a restaurant, the people who serve you. 350,000 jobs there. We have 300,000 jobs for things like firefighters, police officers, auto technicians, people who bring your dog, people who bring you. Let's see, any of the things you kind of see in your communities, we have 300,000 jobs there, and we have about 70,000 jobs right now in the healthcare industry that do not require a college degree. So I got 90,000 people that I'm going to net each year to fill 1 million of those right now. That math isn't math, as they say. So we start to look at this and we go, okay, you say that this growth is going to come from people over the age of 65. Okay, first off, can we anticipate that that group is going to probably take care of themselves? Even that doesn't start to work out. So when they did this, they basically said, look, we are going to gain so many people that are over the age of 75 or over the age of 65, then just by the law of percentages, that's where this growth is going to come from. But there's a problem with that. When you look back at the silent generation, this is their labor force participation rate. And that started going up. Boomers start hitting. Low-income families. That labor force participation starts to take rate. Oh, we have all the boomers now getting into this age category. That labor force participation starts to turn. Each time, as these educated, dual-income families making more money than we've ever seen, ever made in household income over the course of a lifetime, get retirement age, they retire. The average person says they're going to retire at 66. The average person retires at 61. Right now, boomers, as of this year, 25, are 61 to 79 years old. Okay? This, since they made the prediction, this is the labor force participation rate for people 75 and older. Why is this? Because the boomers are starting to enter into this labor force, and they're pulling that labor force participation rate down. This is a faulty assumption that BLS used. So even if you thought, hey, my new hiring strategy is going to be getting people over 65, I'm here to kind of say, I don't think that's going to work either. If you look at the different populations and their labor force participation rate, each time you jump into a new bucket, that number drops dramatically. So as we watch these boomers get older and older, they're going to be dropping into groups that have much, much lower labor force participation. This is just the reality of things. This is one of my favorite graphs in the paper. This question is, when do you believe you're going to retire? Okay? Boomers who are still in the market. I'm going to retire at 68. Gen X, mind you. We're saying 64. Millennials, they say 61. I'm going to retire at 61. And Gen Z, God bless them. They just started. And they are already looking at when they're exiting out at 57. So, here's the thing. And it may not have hit you yet. We had a belief that as time went on, we became a more technical office generation. The jobs got easier. People would work forever. Boomers loved to work. They were working 80 hours a week. They were the yuppies. They don't want to work forever. They love to work. They're retiring earlier than anybody's retired in history because they have the chance, they have the ability to do that. Each generation coming up, even though the work is gotten a lot easier than those days of building things, sitting in factories, repetitive entries, even though that's happening, people are looking forward to work. These married to work. That's the importance of this. We don't see anything in the future that kind of aligns with this vision that what came in the past is going to apply in a way that they think is going to apply. When you do the math, and this is just something I did for the paper, this is the personal thing that I did, and I said, let's say that everybody who turns 65 immediately drops out of the labor force, and let's say that everybody who turns 16 immediately enters the labor force. The latter is absolutely not true because very few teens actually work. That was more for the first paper, and who's going to do the work. But let's just do the math. If that's the case, then in 2027, we'll invert. So there will be more people turning 65 than are 16 years old. Okay, so this is kind of a new thing. I'm going to show you something a little bit that's kind of even crazier about this when we talk about immigration. So with this in mind, who's going to do work? How are we going to get work done? So I talked about this issue that we have where men have been leaving the labor force. We have a lot of these jobs that we kind of depend on there. So how are we going to get this work done? We're going to look at three of these. So let's talk about women. We're going to talk about immigration automation. Women, first off. Okay, one thing we have to understand, congratulations, women, you get more degrees than men by 4 across the board. From associate's degrees to doctorates, females get the majority of our college degrees. Okay, that's great. These are the jobs we're really seeing shortages in, trying to figure out how we're going to get work done. So we don't see this necessarily coming from this population. It's just something to remember. The labor force and what it's comprised of is an important aspect of how we get work done. If we say, hey, recently, labor force participation for women has gotten better and better. This is the kind of the new normal. Let's be careful. If I take immigration out of it, that's not true. Only when we include foreign-born women do we get a record high labor force participation rate. If we take them out, the labor force participation rate for women has not made it back to where it was prior to the pandemic. So that is a great segue into a topic everybody loves to talk about. It's like talking about religion at the dinner table, right? Immigration. It is crazy to think that I knew nothing about immigration about 3 years ago. Nothing. And now, I don't know if there's a new thing that I hadn't been on talking about. Somehow I became this kind of face of this whole thing. I look at this, and I'm going to tell you all these things. I look at the way work gets done. It's a strategic asset. And we're going to look at this strategic asset. Since 2019, this was true up until daggone it last week. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about this. So up until last week, when we got a population adjustment, all of the labor force growth that we had seen in the U.S. from 2019 till now all of it had come through immigration, all of it. The native-born labor force had actually been in decline. With the population adjustment last week, the native-born labor force is now up about 300,000. But the immigrant labor force is up by millions, okay? That is how we're basically increasing our labor force in the U.S. If we go back to 1995, this is crazy, and we look at prime age men, 25 to 54 years old. If we go back to 1995 to now, we can see that the prime age labor force for foreign-born men in the U.S. has grown by 7.5 million. The native-born prime age labor force for men is down 2 million. All of our prime age labor force growth in the U.S. for men has come through immigration. Foreign-born men were 1 in 10 of our prime age male employed workers in 95. They're now 1 in 4. Their percentage of the unemployed has not changed. When they're here, they work. Period. Much lower unemployment rates. This became very, very real last Friday. And that is, as everybody may be very, very well aware, we had a massive surge in undocumented immigration in 22 and 23 to the tune of about 2.8 million, okay? That now got factored into the population adjustment, which is why we saw everything kind of expanding quite a bit. So this is a huge deal. This is kind of how we solved our inflation problem. It's kind of how we all of a sudden got rid of a lot of these shortages that we were seeing in workers, was through this kind of massive increase. It's also a very unpolitically popular thing. However, I'm just looking at how work gets done, and this is kind of how we did it. So as we look at this, we see the dependency on these workers is pretty significant. In construction, not undocumented, all foreign-born workers, 1 out of every 3 of our construction workers are foreign-born. 1 out of every, roughly, 1 out of every 4-ish, some of these other industries, down 1 out of every hospitals, leisure hospitality, our restaurants, hotels. I mean, you just have to look when you're in there, you can kind of see how this works. If we're looking at our healthcare system, we have 5 million foreign-born workers in our healthcare system. It is a huge aspect of how we get work done. If we look at how this has changed over time, construction, back in 2010, it was about 20%, 22% of the workers. Now it's worked its way to about 30%. You can see that for every industry, except, oddly enough, leisure hospitality, it's kind of flipped about a little bit. But almost every industry since 2010 has greatly increased their dependency on foreign-born labor. In New York, you have a massive dependency on foreign-born labor when it comes to healthcare. So let's say theoretically that a world event happens and we cannot process visas, we shut our consulates down, and you can't get people. And let's say they're in a specific industry, like let's throw healthcare out. And you're in a state like, let's say New York, and 60% of your health aides, 30% of your nurses, and 36% of your doctors are foreign-born. And now, you don't have access to them anymore. Shut down. You're going to start breaking out. That happens. If that happens, you freak out. And you'd be like, I got to get somebody in here. I'm going to go get these people from all over the rest of the country, travel, and I'll pay them whatever they want, because I don't have a labor force. My labor force got cut off. Not a little bit of your labor force. A massive amount of your labor force gets cut off from an instant. This is what happens when you have a dependency on something and you lose it. You got to keep this in mind. And I apologize for the wonky-looking thing here. When we look at certain countries, some countries give us a lot more than others. So we're going to talk about the Philippines in a second. When it comes to nurses, the U.S. loves Filipino nurses. They speak English. Their educational goals are kind of aligned with what the U.S. does. The Filipino government, to their credit and now to somewhat in the sense that it's hurting them, really modeled their educational system after what the U.S. did, making their people very, very attractive, not only to the U.S., but to the U.K. and Canada. So we have a tremendous amount of Filipinos that work in the U.S. as nurses. We get our doctors from India and China. We get our home health aides from Mexico, Philippines, and Jamaica. Okay, here is where this starts to get crazy. If we want to keep things going, where we are using these people to take care of our population, we need 3.5 times more immigrants coming in than our current trajectory. In order to keep this at even, we have to do 3.5 times more every year just to keep that ratio the same. Okay? This is where we're kind of heading. And then one of the most incredible things that happened, in the paper, we published something from the Congressional Budget Office about the U.S. population. And what they said was in 2039, the U.S. population, native-born population, would invert. So our native-born population in 2039 would flip over, and the only thing that would keep us above zero would be immigration in 2039. Last week, 4 years after that estimate, they changed the invert from 2039 to 2032, which means our population, our native-born population in 2032, will go into inversion. 7 years of the ahead of the prediction. China's inversion was 4 years ahead of predicting. Japan's birth rate declines are around 4 years ahead of when they predicted them would be. They're seeing way larger declines than they had predicted. The models miss this on the downturn. They always miss it. And the reason is it's exponential. Less people who have less children produce an exponential line, not a linear line. And this is what people keep getting wrong when they look at global population, which is our own population. This is critical. When the Congressional Budget Office, when everybody was looking forward for years, decades, when they were looking at this going, hey, at some point, it's going to be foreign-born people to keep the U.S. population growing. It will no longer be our native-born people. This is an incredible estimate to look at, because before you can get to an inversion in your population, these people have to age out of the labor force, retire, spend those years before they pass away, which means your labor force inversion is going to happen way before your population inversion. Oddly enough, this all lined up with what we started seeing. When we said around 2027 for an inversion, this all lines up. We believe now more than ever you will see this, especially if things continue, if there's a kind of aggressive stance about immigration. This is something that could happen in a very dramatic way. So we have to be very, very analytical about this. Not sensational, not emotional, but just kind of look at this in the way that it is. Here is why this is also really important. And I talked about this is something I've been talking about the past couple of years. The idea that immigration is an unending supply is very, very naive. The countries we get people from also are trying to exist. They're trying to grow. Mexico's unemployment rate is much lower than the U.S. 75% of Mexican companies said they couldn't find workers last year in industries like construction and manufacturing. Strange, isn't it? Because we seem to get a lot of people from there. The Filipino government put a cap. They're like, no more. We can't keep losing all our nurses. We have 100,000 nursing openings in our own country right now. We can't do this anymore. They started to take certain countries and they said, this is it. You're only going to get this amount, and then we're cutting it off. So as we look forward, we start to say we're going to need to increase our ratio of these people. These other countries are going, no, you can't. You can't have them. Like, we can't. This isn't an endless supply of people. So you start to do this and you go, well, wait, Ron, you're saying in 4 or 5 years you're really going to need this workforce. And I'm like, yeah, you will. And then you go right at the point where we start to say, I don't think they're necessarily going to be available. There may be other countries that we have to work with, but just this idea of it's there as a faucet. When we want it, we turn it on. When we don't want it, we turn it off. Is incredibly naive. It's very ethnocentric. You have to think it's everybody going, they want to be something too someday. They want to grow. They want to do something with their country. They are trying to modernize. We can't do that with brain drain and letting all of your people go to other countries. It's something to keep your eye on. I'm not saying it will happen. We're saying you have to think about it, which is something we don't do a whole lot of. When we, real quickly, this is a slide from the older deck. When we look at undocumented workers, about 1.4 million are in construction. We believe that number actually got much, much higher. 15% are our maintenance workers. About 1 million who work in the hotel industry. About 250,000 in healthcare doing things like custodial work. About 1.7 are in our food supply. So basically, from the cultivation of crops through the processing, a lot of them. We all know this is true. This is the most aggravating part about being a labor economist is nothing I'm saying should shock anybody. But yet, it's odd how this all manifests itself out. It becomes a very political conversation instead of, is a strategic asset? We don't really think about, well, what's the value? How are we getting it work done? This is an aspect that we have to think about. So, we take this and we start to look at our labor, we go, well, native born, that's not looking very good. Okay, well then we have immigration. That also is, it could be suspect, but we understand there's a critical dependence there. Okay, then what's going to save us on the robots? You know, I used to hate them, but you know what, Ron, after today, I love it, bring on the technology. I need a robot. There's bad news here. When we looked at every single thing we could find about artificial intelligence, what we found was these companies have been given a lot of money, billions of dollars. To get that money back, you are not going to get that money back making a machine that floats burgers. You're going to get that money back making technology for companies that write big checks. So not at all surprising, the jobs that's expected to be, I hate this word displaced, affected in some way, shape, or form, management consultants, financial managers, accountants, psychologists, that's weird. I don't know if you want a psychologist. Purchasing managers. When we talk about large language models, telephone sales, solicitors, psychologists, again, weird. Education, marketing. None of these jobs are ones that we've said are in big trouble going forward. In fact, I'm going to tell you about that in a little bit with Japan. When we look at the industries that say you need some kind of AI expertise, we need to see that you can talk to these programs. Obviously, IT dominates that. The issue is that when you go and you say, I'm going to take AI, I'm going to put it in front of somebody, there's where we have to just think about it once again. So this is one of our favorite graphs we had in the paper. I love this. So the question is, when will AI improve how customers engage with business? Great question. Okay, on the right, we have business leaders. And 50% of our business leaders say, now. Already doing it. It's amazing. AI is killing it. It helps our customers out. Okay. Now, on the customer side, 33% said never. 16% now. Okay. Yesterday morning, Allstate was an article came out from Allstate, and they said AI. The Allstate executive said AI is doing a much better job emailing our claimants than our people did. It's kinder to them. It doesn't use insurance jargon, and I think that's great. But let's be careful. Sure, you're going to want to justify your investment. If you think it's going to save you money, it's going to do some things, you may want to do that. But don't be naive. Make sure that we're watching the customer experience. When chatbots really started exploding, customer satisfaction with the experience of calling in these things started plummeting. If you're thinking of doing this, be smart about it. You still need some level of human intervention. And for certain occupations in healthcare and such, AI can't walk into a room and look at somebody and go, ooh, I don't like the way they breathe. I don't like the way they look. Something's happening here. I got to do something. We just have to be careful about how we do it. I am not saying don't invest in technology. What I'm saying is how it's utilized and where it's utilized may not be the panacea that we think. So it's a great segue into this. We are not even close to being alone. In fact, we're way behind some other countries. Japan is way ahead of us, a much older population. Their inversion started in 2010. So we're talking about inverting in 2032. They're well down this path. A very old population, no children. That's something else we'll be talking about as to why that happens. But let's talk about what we learned from this. Okay, so first off, we said, well, how is Japan getting work done? Because they do have a lot of dependents still, and yet they don't have a lot of younger people producing. Well, number one, they offshore absolutely everything they possibly can. In fact, now, Japan actually has a surplus of manufacturing workers right now, because they try to get rid of all of that. They have expanded immigration. If anybody knows anything about Japan, up until about 2 years ago, this was just huge now. But they are really accepting of it as far as it is a work check. And won't go any farther than that. Investing in labor-saving tech, they are doing this. If we talk about the paper that they just abandoned the robots in hospitals because the nurses were spending more time facing the robots than they were taking care of the patients. They delay retirements. In Japan, it's incredibly common to work into your 80s. Very common. Very common. And we're going to talk about what that showed us. And then lastly, when you start to have a decline in your youth population, it's natural for people to say, I can't get a doctor where I live now. I can't get these services where I live. So they all move into the cities. It's called urbanization. So if you look at Tokyo, Tokyo is absolutely exploding. Other these cities are exploding. Well, that happens as they drain the countryside. So you see it in Greece, you see it in Italy, a lot in Europe, and it's something that's very likely to happen even in the U.S. in a lot of these cases. You can't get everything you need. You move to the cities. Well, cities have infinitely lower birth rates than countrysides have. So as more and more people move to the cities, you see this kind of exponential decline in the birth rate. Hey, John, how you doing? We need to take a walk. I got a live update on that. All right. They never die, actually, didn't they? All right, so here is the biggest thing, big, huge, massive thing that we found out in studying Japan. When we looked at the Japanese studies, they looked at people who were nearing retirement age or in retirement age in their 80s. They looked at what jobs they applied for, and they all tended to be light office professional jobs. Okay? When we look at artificial intelligence and we see what it's gunning for, what I just showed you, these companies are aiming for finance insurance industries, consulting industries, all those professional jobs. When we look at our massive supply of college grads, which we keep producing more and more every year, they also are looking for office and professional jobs. So we have a problem that doesn't exist getting all of the solutions. While the issues that we're seeing, the industries that we're seeing that kind of keep society running, we don't have anything lined up for. Immigration was the answer for a lot of these industries. But we have to think about that, like this here. So this was something that was very fascinating about. All right, so that gets us to the last bit. And all of this doom and gloom, what can we do? How does this whole work? Why am I here? Why are we kind of looking at all these things? So first thing that happens is, and I hope if nothing else, this is what people walk away with today. Change who you are. Change your mindset about things. You don't have to get a college degree. And if there's any educational institutions in here, my apologies. I'm not devaluing you. I'm saying guidance counselors, everybody telling all of these people, you gotta go, you gotta get a 4-year degree. You can always get a 4-year degree at some point in your life, but we really need you in a lot of these other jobs. We put something in the Who's Going to Do a Work article. It was a construction firm in New York City that was building something, and they said $50 an hour. We've got to get people to build. We got to get people $50 an hour, and I thought, you see HVAC technicians regularly in the 6 digits across this country right now. There are all kinds of skilled trades that pay very well. I'm not saying all jobs pay well. You know, retail clerks, fast food clerks may not make a lot. A fast food manager, franchise owner, can make good money. There's possibility in anything for driven people. This is something we have to start to fix, especially. Not everybody can do the same thing. I'm going to move to get the job I want. Not anymore. Last year was the lowest labor force mobility in U.S. history. Well, we're not moving. Can't afford to. Are way out of rank, especially for new buyers. Immigrants take our jobs, man. I don't want immigrants. Yeah, shoot. They want immigrants. Yeah, they take our jobs. Thank goodness. That mindset, I hope if anything you walk out and you go, I got that part. They do. See, it's kind of important that we do. We have to be smart. If we can allocate them correctly, be fantastic. Got to stop fighting it and start to figure out how to handle it strategically. Hey, look, and we're both working. I can't have a family. Somebody has to have a family. This is the kind of the crazy thing about it. It's a mentality. If you say, I don't want to have children, and I respect that, and I certainly don't want somebody having children I don't want. What you're saying to society is, when I get old, your children to take care of me. Oh, you didn't have any? Then go get them from other countries. So somebody's going to take care of it. Dude. Okay? You have to think about it. I don't think we do. And it's a harsh thing to say. But it's a reality. When it comes to politics, anything, look, man, job creation. We got to create jobs. We got to create jobs. Well, depends. If you're in economic development, it's not just about in the old days, you just brought everybody in. Hey, we just brought this company. They're going to create all these jobs. Whoa, 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 whoa. What if your unemployment is really low? What if the kind of jobs that these people would be taking are the ones that everybody else already has a health warrant and sign up for? You can't just bring anybody into a market if that is a zero-sum game. We're not used to that, okay? We're used to just bringing them in and then it's survival of the fittest. But what if survival of the fittest guts all of the character of your market? It feeds the big bone while taking away from the small. And it drains everything you have. You just have to think about it. I'm not saying it's inherently wrong. I'm saying that we should probably ask the companies in your market, hey, what are you struggling to find? Okay, we definitely don't want to bring in more companies looking for that because we can't even do it here. And then, oh, by the way, as you do that, you think, okay, what do those jobs typically make? They make about $40,000. Okay, well, our average apartment would require a salary of about $95,000. That doesn't work. You have to think about that. As employers, we did everything we could to keep people away from us. But we're in a different market now. I mean, I'm sure the one thing you've heard more than anything the past couple of years when we were out there beating this drum like crazy is the idea of going, look at the core skills of a job. What does it take to be a really effective person in that job? And start getting really awesome about training people. Brag about your world-class ability to get somebody through the door and have them be a rock star. Billy, I'm going to solution. Have them be a rock star. Quickly. That is a great use of AI. We can use AI to help somebody come through the door, and in 3 months, they are now as productive and as amazing as our people who used to be here 3 years. Great use of technology. But we have to start to think about that. How can we upskill? How do we get people, great people, motivated people in the door who otherwise didn't check boxes, who would have been immediately thrown out your ATS? How do you get them in the door so you can look at them and go, I'm hiring that person. I've done this. I tried running cool it. I hired a person one time who was in college. She said she wanted to talk to an economist. She came into my office and sat down in front of me, and the whole time I'm talking to her, she was leaning forward, asking me questions. And she got up out of the room, and I called my boss, and I said, I'm hiring the person who was just in here. I don't know how it's going to happen. She doesn't even know it yet, but I'm going to hire her. Because I want that in front of me. If you're that fascinated about economics, God bless you. That's awesome. And I did. And now she's a principal economist at Target. She's had a phenomenal career. And nothing cool about her is when she got out of high school, she worked for an auto dealership, and she worked in a restaurant. When she finally went to college, she was hungry. She was amazing. So just something to say, I have real world experience. I'm not just telling you things that I haven't tried myself. This idea of cycling people, we lay off, we hire, that's kind of going away. That's what's been happening in the past couple of years. Companies have been very, very hesitant to let really good people go. So there's no longer this attitude of like, we're going to flex the labor force. Now it's more of how do we keep work in a more predictable fashion. So this is what I talked about earlier. As we start to look at industries, kind of the closing part of this, it does come down to this. As you look at your own industry, think about things. You have 4 ways to get work done. That's it. There are 4 ways. You hire people locally. You push your work out to the rest of the globe, globalize. So we're talking about with Japan and manufacturing. You automate. You get AI in there or robots in there to do the work. Or you have an immigration policy. So it could be H-1B, H-2A for agriculture, all these other programs. Educate yourself on them, and you get good at doing this particular things. That's it. Those are your routes. So if you are saying, well, we have to hire. I mean, we hire locally. We want people here, especially for some of these service jobs. Obviously, they can't do it virtually. Hey, put your best people with your new people. Mentoring and training is an amazing way of getting loyalty very, very quickly. When somebody's taken under the wing of somebody who's really, really good, they learn the right ways of doing things. They're quicker, and then they feel like somebody cares about them. They're like, you know what, I'm not going to leave here. I feel like they want me to, they've invested in me. More than your automated training programs. Build a relationship with them, okay? Something else on that, which I think I have on the slide, maybe not. If you do job fairs at schools, a lot of people send their HR people. How much you sending your people to work? Like, you're going to relate so much more to somebody who's like, here's what it's like, okay? Here's what I do. Been doing this for 18 years. Here's why I love it. If you're like me, you're going to love this. If you're not like this, you shouldn't do this kind of work. You're just in training. Way more relational. Partnering with universities and middle schools, here's the big aspect that drives me crazy. Where I live in Florida, they are, I mean, it's almost like poison. When these kids are in high school, the amount of stress that they did to my daughter is inexcusable. AP classes, have you taken these classes? Wow, you're not lined up for college. How are you going to get to college? You're not going to get this program. You're not going to get this aid if you don't do this. Never was ever presented to her anything else. There's one avenue to go down and like, no way. There are many avenues to get to where you want to go. I would rather see everybody saying, give us a chance. Here's what we do. Here's what we want you to tell these. So if you don't have anybody come in here and they say they kind of like this, tell them about us. Let us talk to them. Give us their number. Let us start to bring them in and have them put them on our sites and everything. You've got to actually make your case. They're not going to make your case for you. They're not going to do it on their own. You got to do that. You got to fight your way in. When we interviewed our 1,500 high school students and asked them about, the overwhelming majority said, I'm going to go to college. If not right away, I'm sure they're going to. We asked them this question. Is getting a degree as much about the experience as it is the degree? And the overwhelming amount said, absolutely. As much. The coming of age experience. We always have this joke. When you look at university,